Super excited to be here tonight. I think it's a great topic, and thank you for making the time to come and listen. The way that I want to start tonight is actually by telling you a love story. And you might think, goodness me, what are we talking about a love story in the context of an AI discussion? But bear with me, it's not going to be anything like Married at First Sight. But many of you might recognise this image. The image is from the movie Spike Jonze 2013 called Her. And this regular guy, Theodore, has just come off the back of a kind of a crushing separation. And he falls in love with a girl, and the girl's name is Samantha. But, of course, as you might guess, Samantha is an artificial intelligence. Now, many stories and films that you've heard about have dealt with the topic of robots becoming sentient and forming real relationships with humans. But the way, and the reason why I find this one quite interesting, there's many interesting things about this movie, is that they don't actually picture Samantha with an actual human body. And that forces the focus to be on their emotional connection. So here you can see they're actually on a date. Samantha is actually seeing the world through the camera in Theodore's pocket and talking to him through his earpiece. But the way that Samantha is portrayed is super compelling. And part of that might be because Scarlett Johansson is doing the voice, but she comes across as, funny and entertaining, vulnerable, and moody at times. So, for those of you who know the Turing test, you would not know that she is a machine if you were interacting with her. But just think about the benefits of this technology. It could be enormous. These type of technologies could be fantastic in terms of being the perfect on-demand companions. They could be carers for the infirm and the elderly. So while the plot line is sounding pretty far-fetched, we as the viewers in the audience are kind of thinking, actually, is this pure fantasy? Or is it actually something, it's a prescient view of things just around the corner? Anyway, back to our happy couple. Theodore, not all is well in paradise. Theodore is starting to suspect that her responses are a little bit fake and a little bit contrived. But that's not the only problem. Bigger problems are about to happen because, as you'd expect, being an artificial intelligence, she can learn incredibly quickly and she can interact in parallel. A bit of an awkward scene comes up because Theodore and Samantha are talking, and in the conversation, she confesses that at the same time that she's talking with Theodore, she's also conversing with 8,316 other people or intelligences. So that's pretty awkward, but then it gets worse because she confesses that she's in love with about 624 of them at the same time. Now, as you can imagine, things are not going to turn out well for Theodore. And that is true because by the end of the movie, she's left him behind to go off and hang out with other superintelligences. And herein lies the problem and the fear of AI, that this kind of runaway artificial intelligence is going to actually create these superintelligences that leave us, as a human race behind. If computers can get so smart, they can start programming themselves. If they can actually start transcending their programming, become conscious, and have some degree of free will, then where's that going to leave the rest of us? And so there's two main themes I want to talk about tonight. The first one is practical. How do we as individuals start to think about how do we respond, and even control this technology? The second thing is actually how far can it go? Will we actually see superintelligences like Samantha in the future? I think the state of AI today is pretty impressive, and I can talk to you about the algorithms and some of the things that Justine's just mentioned. So the ads that you get served up, the content you get served up on Facebook. People love self-driving vehicles. Just last month, I was lucky enough to be in San Francisco and had an awesome virtual reality experience called Birdly. And Birdly is basically, you strap on a virtual headset, you're strapped onto a lying down machine, and you fly. And the experience is awesome because it is just so realistic. You even have like a little fan that gives you the impression of going up and down. And I'd really say you've got to try it if you ever get it. But the one AI technology I want to home in tonight is actually computer vision. And it's actually computer vision in the context of facial recognition that I want to talk about, because we can learn a little bit around how computers work, as well as the benefits and also the risks if we think about computer vision. So here's one of my favourite memes. This is a meme called Cupcake or Chihuahua. Now, this is interesting because, first of all, I wouldn't have thought that a close-up of a Chihuahua could look so much like really, it's a muffin, isn't it? Now, the interesting thing here is that any 4-year-old would probably be able to get 100% right what is a cupcake and what is a Chihuahua. But actually for this is a reasonably hard problem. Not a super hard problem, a reasonably hard problem. But most AIs now have actually evolved to the point where they can get pretty much 100% right here. But I thought it might be useful to understand how actually does a computer actually see. So I thought I'd just give you just a brief learning. I'm sorry this is at night and I'm going to give you a machine learning little exercise. How does a computer see? All right, so first of all, to tell the difference between Cupcake and Chihuahua, you've got to actually feed the machine. Lots and lots of pictures of different cupcakes and lots of pictures of different Chihuahuas in all kinds of different poses. But of course, a machine can't actually see that picture. So what you've got to do is digitize it. And digitizing it is turning into tiny little pixels, and every pixel gets turned into a number. And as you know, the only number that a computer really understands is a 1 or a 0. So that is actually what the computer sees. It never sees that. So that's step one. Step two, though, is that the computer has to know which of these pictures that are turned into zeros and ones are actually the Chihuahua and which ones are the Cupcake. This is usually done by a human, and it's called labeling. And even that is turned into, in this case, it would be a 1 or a 0. So with all this information and lots of examples of this, the computer's got all it needs to see. Because then a sophisticated algorithm is built that actually trains all of that data, looks for patterns, and then builds a model that can actually then tell you for any new picture that you give it, is it a Chihuahua or is it a Cupcake? All right, so we've got a little bit of an understanding of that. But in terms of how this actually works, we can talk about facial recognition sort of algorithms later in the panel if we really need to. But I don't know about you, but I hate waiting in line for passport control. Many of you will know that this technology is now in place in many airports around the world. It's certainly in place, as you know, at Sydney International Airport. And this is awesome. I love it. But if you're a customs officer, you're probably not that happy when you saw that your job was going to be automated. And so I guess it actually leads you to start thinking, like this Newsweek article. I really like the headline here: "Robot economy. Forget immigrants. Is this your replacement instead?" But I guess you need to think about. We know that there are still heaps of customs agents. There's certainly less than they were. But the role of the customs agent is now changed because the AI is not going to always let everyone through. So the customs agent is now doing actually a higher level of activity, looking at the actual suspects and the ones that the AI can't actually automatically let through. And sort of trying to weed out the baddies from the goodies, that requires a whole heap of different human capabilities. Emotional intelligence, synthetic thinking, where you're synthesizing. So the bottom line here is that the roles that are left over are actually less robotic and actually rely more on human skills, which leads me to a 2016 report by the World Economic Forum said that these were the top job skills for 2020. And for me, this is actually quite interesting because what you don't see up there is things like calculating. You don't see things like following processes. But what you do see is things like people management, emotional intelligence, negotiation, cognitive flexibility. So I guess the bottom line is that if you're a student or if you're in the situation where you think that your job is going to be subject to automation, these are the type of skills that really are going to be the ones that you need to invest in. So many law enforcement are obviously using facial recognition to pick up criminals. Interestingly, I think it was only just 10 days ago that San Francisco's Board of Governors voted to actually ban the use of facial recognition technology in all of its 53 departments, including the San Fran Police Department. Now, that's pretty amazing. San Fran's kind of the heart of Silicon Valley. It's obviously the heart of the tech world. And they've now banned facial recognition. And the reason for that were twofold. First of all, there is the general concern that this is going to be a police state and pervasive surveillance. But the other thing that you might have heard is that because of biases in the facial recognition algorithm, the concern was that minorities were actually going to be more subject to actually being misidentified and bad sort of outcomes. And so they're saying, let's just hold off, for now. We're going to have a ban until we actually get this technology under control and make sure it's not going to go the wrong way. So we can say strike up one for the good guys, but of course, the anti-crime people in San Francisco are not that happy because from their perspective, it is an awesome tool, to prevent and reduce crime. What's worse, though, is that when we think about the idea of real-time, public facial recognition, we start to get a little bit more worried about this. Now, I'm not sort of aware of this sort of happening in most countries. I do know that there are reports of one country that is actually using this in one of the towns and using it to make sure that there's not terrorist activity coming through. But I do think that when we get to this stage, I would not want to see the proliferation. I'm sure many of you would not either, of this type of usage, because clearly it is a significant invasion of privacy. But like the San Francisco ban, I think we really need to make sure that we as a society are keeping in control, with how this tech is actually regulated and rolled out. Many of you will know of Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is an AI futurist. He's also the director of engineering at Google, so he's no slouch. This actually is an old slide, but I quite like it. And basically, this underpins a lot of thinking about AI. What he's done is actually he's done something quite awesome. He's gone all the way back to 1900, and he's plotted the computing power, going back. And you can see that even though that might not look like an exponential trend, a bit of a nerd fact here is that if you look, we've got an exponential scale on the left. So you can see that the difference between the bottom and the top is 10 to the power of 10, which is just an incredible increase in computing power. So what he's saying is that over more than 100 years, we've seen this exponential rise in computing power. And if it continues going, as you can see from the graph, he theorises that soon the computing power available will actually exceed the human brain. If it then keeps on going, it's going to exceed all human brains. Then maybe we get to artificial general intelligence. Artificial general intelligence is the situation where you've got an artificial intelligence that can actually do all of the functions, all of the mental functions anyway, that a human can. Now, we do not have artificial general intelligence anywhere. Now, I'm sure there might be some theorists here that think that DARPA has got it and just not showing it, but we are not aware of any artificial general intelligence. There is no AI out there that can do the general tasks that a human can. Plenty of narrow AI, which is basically they can do way better than a human in a very narrow task. But if you have trained somebody up to play chess, you've seen the chess and Go, you can't get that AI and then ask them to go down the street and buy you some milk. You can't get them to actually talk to your partner and sort out your relationship issues. So we're still a little way away from that. If we talk about concepts at the edge of reason, see what I did there? Put edge in. The edge of reason is basically the concept of the technological singularity. Now, the technological singularity is out there. But this is saying that once we actually get AI that's crossed the artificial general intelligence threshold, from there things rapidly can increase. Because once you've got that level of smartness, it can program itself. Then you get to artificial superintelligence, which means that the intelligence is smarter than the best of any human at any activity. And from there, the technological singularity is, and I'm going to quote this because it's pretty lofty language, is artificial general intelligences getting so smart they bring in changes to society that are uncontrollable, irreversible, resulting in unfathomable changes to human civilization. And again, this is all based on the concept that technology is going exponentially. So Kurzweil projects, this is an old one, he projects, I think this is 2017, that AGI, artificial general intelligence, by 2029 and the singularity by 2045. Now, good old Elon, I guess he's thinking about all these things. He's sort of buying into, actually, this is, getting out of control. And you can see the famous quote, where he said, artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. In fact, he thinks that AI is humanity's greatest existential threat. And he thinks it's up there or worse than nuclear war. But as you might know, Kurzweil is actually more of an optimist. So he believes that in 2029, again, that sort of same date around AGI, he thinks that advances in medical technology is going to be such that, interesting concept, every year you live, your life expectancy stretches by 1 year. And so you never die if that happens. So, if you've now got 60 more years to live this year, by the time you are 1 year older, you've still got 60 years to live. You never die. Interesting concept. Kurzweil, though, has a second theory as well, which is probably more like this, which is he believes that with AGI, we will actually be able to scan the brain. And consciousness, thoughts, memories, all of that will be able to be uploaded to some digital medium. Very interesting concept. So that's digital immortality, essentially. And look, these are not crackpot theories. This is Time magazine. It's a real one. People are, I didn't fake it up. Anyway, so in terms of the question around how far can things go, from my perspective, there's no doubt AI is going to continue, to increase at a rapid rate. The question, though, about whether we ever get to AGI really comes down to, do you think that just more computing power and probably more smarts, around algorithmic development, does that get us, to AGI? I actually think we probably can get pretty close with enough time. But still the issue there is that even if you get to AGI, will the AGI have intelligence that has consciousness like we do? The ability to be self-aware and self-reflect, and the ability to have significant goals that it wants to pursue. Because researchers are actually divided around whether AI can ever make that leap to gain consciousness. In fact, as many would know, probably more than me here, that consciousness itself is quite a disputed fact. It's hard to, we haven't yet got our hands around it. It's still got a lot of work to be done just to understand what the property of consciousness is. Now, the strict materialist view here is that if the brain, in fact, is a series of atoms and molecules, even though it's very, very cleverly arranged, then in theory, that matter, somehow we can get a digital version of that. It makes sense. That's a coherent thought. If we're materialists, it gives rise, in my mind, to say, yes, probably can get there with computing power to get some kind of digital upload of the brain. Now, the Christian worldview does sort of take a bit of a different take on this. So first of all, the Christian worldview is definitely that God created us as beings that have a spiritual dimension. And we would say that we are definitely more than our biological machine that we inhabit. Now, in theory, I like this slide. I think it's a different riff on the one that you've probably seen for the advertising. God could have created highly intelligent beings without that kind of free will. He could have created robots, but the point here is that the relationship that God would have had with those beings is a bit like the ones that we have with our car, or the ones we have with our cat, or the ones we have with Siri or Google AI. So clearly God was looking for something more than that, when we were created. Now, one of the most famous verses from the Bible does say that, God is love. That's probably well known. And I'm back to the love theme again, so sorry about that in an AI presentation. But the wording is significant because in this case, again, this is Christian worldview. It is saying that that's the essence of who this being is. And the bottom line here is that if he wanted to have creatures, with the ability to actually choose, to be friends with him or not, then he really only had one choice. And that is to create beings with the ability to choose, not robots, but something more than robots. The ability for us to be able to transcend our biology, I guess, with our thinking. So, in my view, we are categorically different from animals and from machines, no matter how intelligent they are or they become. And this profound fact is one of the reasons that Christians do believe in an all-powerful God, while seeing the world around us while there's still suffering and pain and brokenness around us. And it comes back down to the simple fact that humans can choose. So all humans can, and have, chosen to use their freedom at times against God and his principles of self-sacrificial love. And these acts of selfish behaviour are what we call sin, and I know that's an unfashionable term these days, but sin is this thing that breaks down the life-giving relationship that we have with the Creator and leads to pain and brokenness. And we do all suffer from it. So I think the next point would be that God had a plan anyway, from the beginning, to maintain our freedom and forgive the rebellion and eradicate the sin problem forever. And that plan, of course, was put into action by God himself through the birth, death, and resurrection of his Son, Jesus Christ. And from this, everyone obviously is free to accept his gift and freedom from death. Now, this is the Christian view of immortality compared to the Kurzweilian view of immortality. So I thought it was just interested to do that little diversion to compare, I guess, the ideas. In terms of the question of whether we're going to risking being the subjects of the AI overlords and we're going to be there, I think somebody said we're just going to be around to plug them in and feed them grapes. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that catastrophic outcomes could occur, probably will occur at some points. AI can be misused by kind of criminal elements. But I don't think it's going to run out of control because it's going to gain the superconsciousness that we have as humans. And again, from the Bible, we have the confidence from the plan that God's put in place that the future, in the future, the tears will be wiped away and sin will be no more. Anyway, it's time to wrap up. So here's my summary. AI is like any powerful technology in that it's going to bring amazing benefits. It's going to eradicate disease. It's going to it's going to prolong life. It's going to improve equality potentially and reduce crime. But with the great power of AI, there does become great risk. And I am with Elon Musk saying that we do need careful consideration as a society in terms of how we manage and control. But in terms of how we prepare for the work environment ahead There are steps we can take to be ready. I think we have to focus on skills that complement and don't compete with the hyper-intelligent machines. And if we do that, we're not going to go wrong. So what I'd say is let's enjoy the AI future ahead of us, albeit with eyes open, because like my Birdly experience, there's going to be some amazing experiences ahead. Thank you.